Hello, everyone. We're live on Facebook right now. My name is Gonçalo Santos. I'm an anthropologist based at the University of Coimbra. And I am here to welcome you to our third virtual seminar organized by Sci-Tech Asia Research Network. I will be co-hosting this event together with my colleagues Loretta Low, based at the LSE, and Yichan Rao at the University of Hong Kong. Today's speaker is speaking to us directly from Seoul, and it's going to be introduced to you by Yichan Rao. Yichan, please.
Welcome again, everyone. We are so pleased to have Professor Myung-Ae Choi to speak with us today. Myung-Ae is an environmental geographer exploring the politics, cultures, geographies, and technologies of conservation in East Asian developmental state, especially South Korea. She is now research assistant professor at the Center of Anthropocene Studies in Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. Myung-Ae received a Doctor of Philosophy in Geography and Environment from the University of Oxford and taught environmental politics and governance at London School of Economics and Political Science. Today, her topic is AI Ecologist, the use of algorithms for wildlife monitoring in the DMZ. Now let's welcome Myung-Ae.
Yes, thank you for a very kind introduction, Ichan. And it's a really great pleasure to talk about my research to the researchers of Sci-Tech Asia Research Network. Yeah, I believe we have common interest in terms of science, technology, and also East Asia. So as Ichan introduced, I'm a human geographer. I have been looking at the cultural and political and geographical aspect of nature conservation, and now I'm trying to extend it to the technological side of it. So yeah, so I will start with sharing my screen. Yeah. So yeah, so the project I will be talking about today is fairly new one, and also it is an ongoing project. We started earlier this year, and we suffered with this COVID-19 related restrictions, as all of us did. And so so my talk will be sharing what we've done so far and some of my observations about the human-AI interactions from this project. So any comments and any questions will be greatly appreciated to improve and develop this research project further. So yeah, my talk is going to be in like 3-4 parts. So I will begin with a brief introduction of the digital conservation and the DMZ, and then introduce two kind of mini projects that uses algorithms for ecological research, and then share some of my observations about the common and differing epistemologies of human ecologists and AI ecologists. And then I will briefly sum up by thinking about some like implications. So digital conservation, basically digital conservation refers to the use of, increased use of digital technologies for nature conservation in terms of producing ecological data of animals and plants, and also some data on human activities such as poaching, logging, and also producing very spectacular representations of nature by using digital technologies, and also using these technologies for environmental education, so covering broad areas of the environment. Actually, it's not uncommon to use technology for conservation. We know about the satellite tags and trail cams, but digital conservation has been inspired by kind of new round of technologies which has been risen for the past 10 years. So this includes new devices like drones and some remote sensing devices, such as spy cams operated by automation, and also some smartphones. So we used to attach sensors to animals or plants, but these multi-sensor equipped smartphones like these ones, these are attached to humans and turning humans as the sensor that can collect ecological and environmental information. And also there has been some development in analysis part as well. Machine learning and cloud computing, this enables very fast and remote analysis of big ecological data. And this has received increased attention for the past 10 years. Actually, there is a hope and some kind of excitement that digital technologies could help us to produce environmental big data and also process the data with a great speed. And also they probably allow us to access remote and dangerous places, which has received limited attention from ecologists. So this new trend in conservation actually resonates with a broader turn to the digital in social sciences for the past 10 years, which was largely inspired by the rise of big data, algorithm, and cloud computing, and so on. So among this new trend, we are specifically interested in the use of algorithms for conservation. So as environmental geographer Bill Adams, he outlined in his recent review about the use of algorithms for conservation. There are 3 different and also slightly overlapping ways. The first one is algorithms allows automated identification of animal species by making use of remotely captured images or sometimes sounds. This Guardian newspaper, this Guardian article reports a new AI model is developed, and this AI can identify individual bird species, which is actually not an easy job for a trained ecologist. And these algorithms can also allow automated operation of remote devices such as drones and also wind turbines like this one. So in this case, when birds approaches this wind turbine can automatically shut down to avoid the collision. And finally, algorithms can assist us to make environmental decisions. So we can run environmental simulation based on by using algorithms, and this can help us to predict the future outcomes, and it can be used for making environmental decisions, for example, in environmental impact assessment, things like that. So we are focusing on the first use of algorithms, developing some algorithms that can identify animal species and provide population estimates. So there has been some growing interest in social sciences about digital conservation, and this work has discussed more practically the ways in which we could apply technologies to conservation, and also some related governance issues. And critical political economy analysis, which is concerned with the production of digital environmental data, and also some environmental big brother kind of problems involved in the digital surveillance. And also very recently, there has been increased attention to the ways in which our engagement with digital technologies can reshape the ways we think about nature and we relate to nature. So this is more like epistemological and ontological questions. So I would say our research project engages with the first and the fourth avenue of this study of digital conservation. So let me just briefly introduce what this field site and what our project is about. So I assume many of you heard of the DMZ, the Korean Militarized Zone. This is a ribbon-like territory in Korean Peninsula. This was the front line between North and South Korea in 1953 when the Korean War was about to finish. So as part of the ceasefire agreement, and both parties of North and South Korea agreed to move their troops back 2 kilometers from the front lines and then leave the space kind of empty. So this created a 4-kilometer wide and 248-kilometer long territory, which we now call the DMZ. And actually, there are several lines in and around the DMZ. So the military demarcation line, this is the border between North and South. And there is another line 2 kilometers south from the MDL, which is Southern Limit Line. And there is a northern equivalent in North Korea as well. So 2 kilometers on both sides creates the DMZ. And from this SLL, there is another line called the CCL, Civilian Control Line, which is 5 to 10 kilometers south from the MDL. And this area is called the Civilian Control Zone. And another line, again, 25 kilometers south from the MDL, and this creates a sort of border area. So there are some different categories of the areas, and then different levels of restrictions are applied to the DMZ, CCZ, and the border area. So since the creation of the DMZ in 1953, humans, except from the military personnel, were completely removed from the DMZ. That's the part of the agreement. But it's worthwhile to remember that this area was very lively before the Korean War. So Cheollon, for example, that is my field site. That is a province in the middle of Korean Peninsula. Now it is divided into North and South Korean areas. Cheollon was actually really lively. There was a railway between Seoul and Wonsan, which was established in 1914, and Cheollon provided one of the centers of the railway lines. And this province was developed for industrial agriculture in the 1930s, and they produced rice. And that actually attracted migration from all over the country and made the city center of Cheollon with a population of 80,000, which was really big at that time. And that continued before the Korean War. But a 3-year war between 1950 to 1953 destroyed villages and facilities, everything, and then this area was left untouched since 1943, which is about like over 60 years now. And if you see the photo above here, and this is what Cheollon looked like in the 1930s. And the area is now reclaimed by nature and turned into wetlands and bushes, shrubs. Since the 1970s, there was kind of wild imagination about the DMZ as ecological haven. Human settlements were removed, and there was kind of assumption human settlements were removed and animals and plants were left to roam very freely. Therefore, the ecosystem has been now fully restored. That was the assumption. So DMZ was often referred as the treasury of ecology, which has occupied the central stage of the popular discourses and representations of the DMZ inside and also beyond South Korea. So since the mid-1970s, there has been over 20 environmental surveys of the CCZ area, actually, the broader DMZ area. And the surveys shows DMZ, the CCZ area has a good diversity of species compared with other parts of South Korea, which has been heavily industrialized. But very, very few surveys has done inside of the DMZ because of the access issues. The DMZ itself, the secluded area, it's controlled by the UN and also covered with over 2 million landmines. So it's almost impossible to have a good access of the entire area. So the first study inside of the DMZ took place in 2008, but it was not finished. It was suspended due to the increased military tensions between North and South Korea. And there is now a sort of annual survey carried out by National Institute of Ecology, but only for 5 days per year, and they have to following the patrol routes. So it's quite limited, and there's a lot to be done to study the ecologies of the DMZ. One of the signature animals of the DMZ is the cranes. So Korea sits on the migratory route of several crane species. So those crane species spend summer in Siberia and Northeast China, and they come down to China, Korea, Japan for winter from November to early March. So in Korea, we had a pretty good wintering population of red-crowned cranes for a very long time. Historically had the good population of red-crowned cranes. But we lost most of them due to the very intensive hunting during the Japanese colonial occupation, and also reclamation of wetlands for urbanization and also for industrialization. And finally, the Korean War came. So cranes disappeared. Cranes has been endangered animals, at least in South Korea. Then something strange happened in the mid-1990s. So since mid-1990s, cranes returned to the DMZ and CCZ, especially around the Cheoran area. This may sound very strange, but most of the CCZ area is actually rice field. So this is a photo I took July this year, and this is the view from one of the military outlooks inside of the CCZ. You can see the green field here. These are the rice fields. And when at the end of the green field, you can see some of the mountains. So these mountains in the back are actually in North Korea. So somewhere between the mountains are the DMZ, excluded DMZ area. So there was some restrictions in terms of the development of the CCZ area due to the security reasons. So other parts of South Korea has experienced very rapid and manufacturing-based and heavy chemical-based industrialization. But these areas, the CCZ area was not able to pursue that kind of industrialized trajectory. Instead, they allowed, what was allowed here was agriculture. So the residents converted, residents around the CCZ area, they converted the battlefields into rice field. And also they carried out agriculture, mostly rice farming, assisted by machines and also agri-sciences. And they now produce one of the best rice in the country. And this mode of a sort of industrial large-scale farming, rice farming, produce a quite large amount of residual grains, and they became the food for the cranes. So the cranes have ample source of food in the CCZ area, and also the nearby DMZ area actually offer a very safe, untouched, undisturbed nesting places for them. So this makes Charon a very attractive wintering place for the birds. So we have altogether 7 crane species coming down to Charon, and 2 of them are the animals of most concerned. The first one is red-crowned cranes, the one like here with a red crown on the head. And red-crowned cranes is classified as endangered by IUCN, and the global population of red-crowned crane is 1830. I actually went up to Charon last weekend, and for the crane survey, and we counted the head of the red-crowned cranes we can spot, and we counted 1,057. So it's like it's slightly less than, slightly over half of the world population. And the other species concerned is white-naped cranes. It has a bit reddish eyes and also gray body. And this bird is classified as vulnerable by IUCN. And the global population is 4,500. And last weekend we counted 6,500. And I don't know why this happened, but yes, we did counted that number. Anyway, so this means the CCZ and the DMZ is really crucial place for these birds. But we know very little about these birds because the security related access issues. So we can we can get into the CCZ, unlike the DMZ, but we cannot stay overnight inside of the CCZ. We have to leave when the sun sets. So, so I hope these offer some kind of rationales for our research project that explores some new technologies for monitoring wildlife, including cranes in the DMZ. So this is our research project. This is an interdisciplinary project, and for which I'm part of it. And within and also beyond the KAIST, so we have social scientists and humanities scholars from Anthropocene studies. We also have some computer engineers from this broader KAIST as a campus, and also some collaborators from Ecologist from National Institute of Ecology. So we have 2 aims. The first one is to is more like humanity and social science kind, and we try to understand the DMZ through the framework of the Anthropocene. And the second aim, which is the focus of today's talk, is to explore how we could use digital technologies for environmental research of the DMZ. So for the second aim, we have 4 mini projects. And I will be focusing on the first 2. The first one is a classification of mammal species, and the other one is a fine-grained crowd counting of cranes. And both are here to develop deep learning algorithms to analyze wildlife images, which we tentatively call AI ecologists. Like AlphaGo, we wanted to give some name to the algorithms that we are developing. So the first project is to develop an AI algorithm that can identify several mammal species by using wildlife images captured from trail cams. So the data, image data we are using is the trail cam images by National Institute of Ecology. NIE set up about like 100 trail cams inside of the DMZ for monitoring purposes. And trail cams have been widely used for ecological surveys. attached to the trees and poles and triggered by the movement of animals, and mostly big animals like mammals, and it takes photos of these animals. The trouble with the trail cam is that the data can be a bit too big. It takes ages for human ecologists to identify the species, and which eats up their precious time and energy to work on more interesting and important analysis of the trail cam data. That's what ecologists of NIE told us. So we provide the computer with trail cam images. Altogether, we provided 16,000 trail cam images. And the deep learning algorithms we are using is convolution neural network, which is widely used for computer vision analysis. And then the computer is expected to provide the probability each of the 7 species that are concern of ours. So for example, here is the probability of this image. So the probability of to be the animal in this image can be species A is 0, species B 0 again, species C can be 85%, species D again it's 5%, species E is 0, species F is 10, and species G is 0. So this enables us to conclude that this animal in this image is can be species C by 85%. So that's what the algorithm is doing. And so far, we have run several tests by changing the settings, and the accuracy at the moment is somewhere between 67 to 74, which is which needs an improvement, at least on up to 90%. One of the big issues here we have is the very skewed distribution of the wildlife data. So we have a total of 16,000 images, but 5,000 of them are water deers, and another 3,500 is wild boar, and we also have over 7,000 error images just triggered by leaf or trees or wind. So the animal of prime interest here is the moon bears, but we only have one image captured that captured the moon bears. So I think it's kind of inevitable and also very typical for wildlife data. And there are some reasons why endangered species called endangered species. So they are really difficult to capture. So we are working on this by adding some additional images from other sources and also changing the learning strategies to improve the probability of species identification. And the other project is focusing on the cranes. So we are trying to develop an algorithm that can identify the crane species and also provide a species-specific number of the population. So for example, in this picture, we have 5 red-crowned cranes and also 13 white-naped cranes, things like that. This deep learning algorithm has largely been developed for crowd counting, human crowd counting. And we are trying to apply this algorithm to count non-human animals, especially cranes here. We have 5 classes, adult and juvenile red-crowned cranes, and also adult and juvenile white-naped cranes, and also one goose species, which appears a lot in the area. Crane researchers collaborating with us, they specifically asked us to train the AI to be able to provide separate estimates of the adult and juvenile population, because it is a crucial piece of information to give a prediction of the future population changes of these birds. So that's what we do. So similarly, we showed the computer about this time 1,500 crane images. We are using the photos taken by ecologists because there is no trail cam images available at the moment, although we are producing some, and I will get back to this later. This goes through algorithms. This goes through the convolution neural network model, and it produces the 5 class-specific density maps. And these, by putting these weights given to the dots together, the computer can predict how many cranes, specific particular cranes are in the image. In this case, like 40, about like 45. So far, it works. So this is an input image here, and as seen from the ground truth, this image contains 39 adult white-napped cranes and 7 juvenile white-napped cranes, and the computer prediction offered 42 adult cranes and 4 juvenile cranes. It's not perfect, but it works. It's very close to the ground truth. But when it comes to a bit more complicated images like this one, AI is less competent. So in this picture, we have several white-napped cranes and also red-crowned cranes and some geese species. The ground truth is here, but what the computer produced is like this. So for example, it should have like 32 juvenile white-napped cranes, but it only says 9 of them. So it needs lots of improvement in this regard. So at the moment, the mean absolute error of the crowd counting, so mean absolute error means how many birds are wrongly counted, not wrongly counted. For the red-crowned cranes, it's slightly over 1, but white-napped cranes, the adult ones, it's over 5 or 5 to 6. So it needs more improvement. So we are working on this by changing the deep learning strategies and providing more information. So then I want to draw the attention of the audience to human AI relations a bit. So this is based on my own observation, my interviews, and working with ecologists and computer engineers. So what intrigues me most is the epistemological aspect of AI ecologists, AI algorithm. So how do computers know this is the particular cranes, and this is the specific species of mammal, this is wildcat? And are there epistemological approaches different from those of human ecologists? And then how human ecologists know this is the crane or this is the wildcat? So this is an image I borrowed from the internet, and this is what we humans see the image. And this is what the computer see the same image. So here we see 3 happy puppies, but the computer cannot see the image in the same way. They converted the images into the numbers, and this is what they see. So that's pretty different. But on the other hand, when I asked my ecologist colleague, how do they know what it is? And they said, just keep looking at it and then you will get it. And then I asked the same question to computer engineers and how the computer know what it is. And they said the same thing, keep showing the images to the computer and then it gets it. So this suggests there are some common and also different areas of ecological epistemologies of the humans and AI, and that I want you to look into, and I still are looking into this epistemological side of it. So to share some of my observations. First of all, when human ecologists see wildlife images, they look for identification keys, which is described in the field guide. So for example, this is red-crowned crane. Ecologists would quickly scan. This has a red crown on the head and has a black neck, snow white body, and also black secondary wing feather here. So this, they conclude this is red-crowned crane. So they look for the specific identification keys. And what about the AIs? So AI goes through a training process called backpropagation. So when we provide an input image, and then they go through the model with multiple layers and provide an output like this one. Then we provide a sort of ground truth like this, and then pass the output backward to update, to get it updated to provide better output. So by comparing these two, and the computer updates its outputs again and again until it provides more like most accurate answers. So from providing the image and then going back to the beginning of the circle makes one iteration, and they use numerous round of these iterations. For the cranes, when we ran 200 iterations of backpropagation, and for the mammal species, mammal analysis, we went through 50 iterations. So in this crane case, when we offer the ground truth, we offered two red dots here. This is where the head of the cranes of particular species located. So we were kind of hoping the computer can focus on these dots when they get it updated, so can focus on the dots next time. So in this sense, this is sort of, we are translating ecologist idea of identification keys to something that the computer can understand. On the other hand, in this mammal project, we did not specify a certain point. Instead, we just offered the information that this is particular species. Then when we check the propagation process, we realized the computer had slightly different ideas from the human ecologist. So this is an image of water deer, and the red circle here points where the computers are focusing on at the moment. And if an ecologist sees this image, and he or she will be looking at the legs, because that is one of the identification keys of water deers. But the computer also looking at some strange areas, just a random background of the image. So this creates kind of misunderstanding that AI identifies a particular species not based on the identifiable ecological keys, as we hope, but by random factors, such as particular part of the backgrounds that constantly reappears when the particular species appear. So there can be some kind of misunderstandings. And also, secondly, I would like to talk a little bit about the very different epistemological world of humans and AI, and machines more generally, how they take photos of wildlife images. So here on the left side, this image is taken by human ecologist. This captures key features of red-crowned cranes, probably reflecting the ways in which the ecologist who took this picture see the cranes. But on the right-hand side, this is an image of wild boar taken by a trail cam. So here we can see some very random part of the animal. So unlike ecologists, the trail cams have no intention, and they just are triggered by the movement of something. So this creates some issues for us because in the beginning, we thought we develop crane AI by making use of ecologist data and then apply this algorithm to analyze trail cam images. But we are gradually realizing that the data produced by different domains by ecologists and by the trail cams are quite different. And the algorithms might not be transferable and probably need a significant modification to make it work. Finally, so there is a constant human intervention in the development and operation of AI. That's slightly different from the prevalent thinking of AI as autonomous, self-autonomous being. So when we developing AI ecologists, what we did first was refining the data so that computers can work. So this required the resizing of the images. It shouldn't be too large, otherwise the limited CPU memory cannot load the data. And also it shouldn't be too small either, because if it is too small, the computer cannot clearly see the details of the species and make some wrong predictions. And then the next step was labeling. Labeling means to give some answers, ground truth answers. So when we provide the wildlife images, we also need to provide the ground truth, and which is the files with the correct labels. So that requires intensive labeling process. So for example, for the crane species, we had to put some dots on the head and the body of each and every cranes with class-specific color codes in 1,500 images. And for the mammal species, similar process were undertaken, but this time it converted the information into textual formats and put it in the Excel files. So this labeling is indeed a very labor-intensive and very much time-consuming process. Still, this is the crucial part of AI development, and the accuracy of AI output really depends on the accurate labeling. So when we did the labeling, we had 3 research assistants, and we also invited one ecologist to share his skills of identifying the correct crane species. So there has been some intervention of ecologists to make the AI work better. And finally, there were some areas where we could catch the glimpse of sort of creativity that emerges from human AI interactions. So there are, of course, there are very good AI models available, but to make it work with a particular species and particular images we had to make modifications. And I would like to view this modification as a kind of process to be attuned to the non-human differences, the differences of the species and also differences of the machines. So for example, for crowd counting, the labeling usually requires pointing a dot on the head of the individual, like penguins here. So we also started putting the dots on the head of the cranes, but we soon realized that a lot of cranes are hiding their heads, or they put their heads down when they're eating. So we decided to place an additional dot on the body of on the body of the cranes and connect the head and the body with a line. And from the pilot test, the labels of the body labels work better than the head labels, the mainstream one. And another example, there was some unique feature of trail camera, which is that they take 3 pictures in a row. So in the beginning, we trained the computer with the single images. That's what everybody does. Then we changed the input into 3 successive images, and it worked better. So in this case, I would like to think this modification from 1 to 3 successive images could be a way to make modification reflecting the specific features of the machine the trail cams, and also the specific ecology of the animals that we are working with. So this brings to the conclusion. As a way of concluding, I would like to think about some implications of our AI ecologist for conservation and also for human AI relations. I believe it could make some contribution to the ecological study of the DMZ, because it would allow a fast analysis of large amount of data produced by remote sensing devices. In this case, mostly trail cams. So we have installed a dozen of trail cams around the CCZ area this winter, last month. And I have downloaded the first batch of the data. And for just the 10 days data, we have more than 1,000 photos and 7-hour videos. So computer-assisted analysis could be a big help in this kind of big ecological data. So when AI is combined with remote sensing devices, it could allow a better access of the DMZ and the CCZ, where human ecologists had a limited access so far. And now they cannot stay overnight, but the trail cams can stay overnight. So this is the night image of the cranes taken by our trail cams. And this kind of new data can help us to study the ecologies of the cranes and other species, other animals, cranes inside of the CCZ and the DMZ. And furthermore, the best contribution that an AI could make is not just conducting very tedious jobs, but find some creative and unanticipated connections out of the big data, probably something human eyes cannot pick up. So we don't know what this could be, but we will stay curious about the surprises that AI ecologists could offer. And when it comes to the human-AI interactions relations, I would like to think the wildlife monitoring, in this case, as sort of multi-species practice in which humans, cranes, and machines work together to produce an extended and deeper understanding of wildlife. So here, AI ecologists collaborate with human ecologists rather than just simply replacing them. So in fact, this project was born out of the ecologists who wanted to find a breakthrough in the ways in which they do species identification and crane census. They have been done this in the same format for the past 30 years like this, and they want to make some changes, and digital technologies can help them to make these changes. And also what happened here is quite different from these prevalent and also binary understandings of an AI. We tend to think AI as an autonomous system that will replace human workers, or it could be an inert device under human control. But instead, humans and machines actively collaborate in terms of the development and operation of the shared future of wildlife monitoring. So perhaps then it's possible to think AI as a relational achievement that emerges from the multi-species entanglement of wildlife monitoring. That's what I'm trying to develop from this project. So that's brings to the end of the presentation, and thank you for your attention. That's the end of the talk. Shall I stop the share screens here?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Myung-Ae, for sharing this very fascinating talk. So we'll open the floor for questions. So if you have questions, just send it through chat box. Just saying that you want to ask a question, so we could, ask you to take the sequence of asking. But while you're doing that, I took the liberty to ask a question that I'm very curious about, because I think the talk fascinatingly captures two very interesting curiosity that is going on. One is human curiosity to study animals as ecologists, and also the ecologist curiosity to train the AI to know the animals. So I was wondering, to what extent, because you mentioned about those ground truths are quite, certain or uncertain, among the ecologists themselves, because, because I think the ecologists are also trained to kind of identify those animals, and then they have to take many years maybe to really differentiate the different types of animals and then identify them, once they see them. So I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that part, how humans are trained to see the animals, versus the machines are trained.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Ichan, for the questions. So I don't know where to start. So you are asking what are the differences between the human ecologists are trained to identify the species and the AI ecologists are trained to identify the species. Is that what you are asking?
Yeah, kind of. Because I was curious, because there must be also different types of uncertainties when people are learning to differentiate those animals. Because you said that AI sometimes make kind of interesting mistakes.
From my observation for the past 7 or 8 months, I learned that the process of human ecologists are training themselves and the AI are training themselves are quite similar in terms of the process, and that requires lots of practice and also making mistakes and correcting the mistakes. That's very much similar. And then, as you mentioned, human ecologists are not very certain about their predictions, and AI is not certain as well. So they're quite similar, but one thing I want to find out, or I want to explore a bit further for the AI is some of these, the ability of AI creating very strange and unanticipated connections and out of the data, because human ecologists are trained within these disciplinary customs and disciplinary culture, and they make their predictions based on their trainings. So they do provide interesting and creative they do make a creative and interesting connections, but still within their disciplinary boundaries. But AIs could make something out of the discipline and something crazy or interesting. I'm not sure if I answered to your question, but is that what you were asking?
Yeah. So that was also the direction I was guessing, but I just hope to know if you have more details to share. I think we have in the chat box some questions. Maybe we could address them one by one. So the first is asked by Nika. So after more than 1,000 photos captured during your 10-day experiment, can the automated mammal identification show if a photo consists of mammals instead of identifying a particular species?
Oh, about these photos I mentioned in the end of the presentation, that only take photos of cranes. That's crane-specific experiments. So all of the photos contain crane images. We set the trail cams at the resting place of the cranes, so there's no mammals appeared in these photos.
Yeah, and then the follow-up question, how does it work for pictures captured by trail cameras showing mammals partially instead of fully? And what tweaks in the code for pictures taken at night and during the day?
what tweaks in the code for the pictures taken at night? Nika, if you're here, could you elaborate a little bit about your question?
I'm here. So
yeah.
for like in my college, we're also doing something similar, but we are observing all of the wildlife on campus. So we see that for the pictures taken during the day, we can see the animals clearly. So it's easier for the researchers to like kind of like pinpoint. But then for the pictures taken during the night, we can only see the seal hole. So it's kind of like the circumference of the animals instead of seeing the areas.
Yeah, we have photos of daytime and also nighttime, and then the quality of the photos of nighttime is not very good for the analysis. However, we were able to see the differences. I mean, the dynamics of the animal activities that's quite different during the daytime and nighttime. So in the daytime, the animals looked less active, whereas in the nighttime, the animals looked more active, because we have just not just the photos, we also have a video images, so we could make some comparison. So am I answering to the question,
or? We're gonna have Loretta asking the next question.
Hi,
Loretta.
Hi. Thank you so much for the fascinating talk. I think what I found most interesting or intriguing is that, you know, like the literature about AI, about big data and surveillance at the moment in social science, in humanities, it seems to most of them underscore the negative impacts, especially their use in human society. And I think from your talk, it highlights its contributions, which is not so much, is less focused on when it comes to like the use of AI in human societies. I think most of the focus or the concerns when we think about AI and is the surveillance aspect. So I'm really pleased to hear that you talk about the contributions and also the collaboration between the human ecologists and the AI ecologists. They seem to know each other's limitations, and they seem to, you know, have a plan forward of how to, you know, work better together to get something out of these technologies. But yeah, I do wonder if the scientists or the people in your lab or you know, the experts, do they have any qualms about using AI ecologists in conservations in similar ways that when we talk about AI or big data in using it for humans in human society? Like what because you've made the contributions and the positive aspects very clear. I just wonder if there's anything that they talk about that, or there's these potential problems with AI ecologists. Thank you.
Thanks, Loretta, for asking that a very important question, because that's been the topic of debate in our lab, and we are aware of these negative impacts of AIs in terms of the surveillance, and also it's slightly different ways for the digital conservation, especially conservation by algorithm. There are some issues of that there is a possibility that we relegate the important decisions to the computer programmers who actually programming the algorithms. So environmental decision making is very much political. It should consider other factors which cannot be represented as well. It's really complicated and sophisticated process, and actually really, really political process. But when we start to rely on algorithms, and there is high chance that we just relegate this environmental decision making to the computer programmers who has limited or who hasn't thought much about the complex areas of environmental politics. So when we are working with these computer engineers, we really realized that they haven't thought about cranes not a single moment in their lifetime, but they are really good people, and they didn't know about what I would say they didn't realize the real impact of what they are doing. But I think it's essential to educate ourselves when we are developing algorithms like this.
Thank you.
No problem.
And then we have Joe as the next question.
Hi, thank you very much, Dr. Choi. Very interesting talk. I have two quick questions. The first is just a simple factual question. I'm just curious, in the civilian control zone, was there no pesticides in the rice cultivation? Because in Taiwan, especially in the 70s and 80s, the population of egrets collapsed because of pesticide use in rice producing areas. So I'm just curious on that. But my more important question is an issue about sampling. I'm not a biologist, but as an undergraduate, I worked as a biologist, and when you do water ecology, you use nets, or you take a sample of water to see the wildlife in that. And I'm just curious, how are these numbers being used? Even when we did bird studies, it was looking at migration, for example. So you actually watch them. You park yourself for several days every year, and you count the number of birds flying by. I'm not quite clear how the ecologists are using the numbers that you're producing from these cameras. So could you explain how that helps you get a sense of the overall population numbers?
Thank you, Joe, for the questions. And the easy one, the first one is we did use pesticide a lot during the 1970s and 80s, and it created some problems. But the use of pesticides in agriculture was a common practice all around the country, and it didn't. The CCZ area was not received spotted in attention. Just that it was commonplace in the whole country. And these days, the farmers who work inside of the CCZ, they try to make a transition to organic farming because it pays better. And then the rice they cultivate there is known for the quality. It's one of the best rice in the country. So they just want to take the edge a bit further by making transition to organic farming. And about the sampling, I know a lot of bird ecologists use samples to give a prediction of the whole population, but cranes work in different ways. So when they count the number of the cranes, they pick one particular day, one particular day, and they divide the whole area into 4, 5 or different sections, and one team cover one area. So there usually comes with 5 teams, and for 5 hours or 6 hours, they count all the cranes they encounter within their designated area. So I participated in those crane census last week, and that's what they do. So, and in the afternoon, they meet together and share all their data and do the calculation by adding all the numbers. That's what they do with cranes, because cranes are really big and you cannot miss it. Does it make sense? Okay.
It does. If I could just follow up, given that, I'm not quite clear how the advantage of the AI seems less significant in that case for the cranes.
Yeah, it is less significant at the moment. It is not very much significant, but we also have these cranes. a lot of cranes stay in a small groups like 4 to 5, but there are some areas cranes are flocked together like 200 and 300. And then it takes lots of time to count each and every number of the cranes. And if we could use AI to give estimate of this large group of the cranes, and that could help the ecological survey. And furthermore, we don't know much about how they use the resting places in the evening, because they use 3-4 certain resting places. So when you go to the resting place, you can see like thousands of cranes, and then we want to give an estimate of the population.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Gonzalo, you'll be the next.
Thank you, Myung-Ae, for the fascinating talk. I mean, really interesting, very rich. I learned a lot. I have 2 quick questions, perhaps one very quick question and one more complex question. So the quick question actually has been asked by Bonnie already. And I was struck by the fact that your project, the way that you presented it, seemed to be focused on sight only. I mean, the data that you are collecting seem to be primarily focused on sight. Is it just because on, images, so no sound, for example? And I wonder if this was a deliberate choice for a specific reason. I would like to hear you more on that. Why is data on other kind of senses being ignored? And then the more complex question has to do with your argument on AI being a relational achievement. Because it strikes me that, I mean, in the specific case that you're talking about, and you're talking mostly about the usage of AI in wildlife monitoring for conservation purposes. But I wonder if you can isolate AI from that specific area, from other developments in AI ecologies. Let me explain to you where I'm coming from. I'm a bit of an amateur ecologist, in addition to being an anthropologist. And I've started to use smart apps like iNaturalist and Smart Plants recently as I go along in my trails to the mountain to identify not animal species, but plant species. And I find myself in the situation that you found yourself in your project, that I see my interaction with AI as a relational achievement. Sometimes the smartphone helps me recognize some plants, and sometimes it helps me improve my knowledge. But I also start thinking whether these machines can actually be a way of producing subjects that are unable to develop the necessary knowledge, including the identification keys that you were talking about, to become human ecologists. Because in a way, the way that the machines operate, can be perceived in a way as they are encouraging, the human subjects to feel that now that we have these machines, we don't really need to acquire this kind of knowledge that has been, cultivated by this discipline called human ecology or ecology, right? So I suppose my question is it that simple that you can just get away with saying that AI is a relational achievement, or do you have to take in more seriously questions about de-skilling that may be occurring as these new technologies are being introduced, not just in scientific sites, but also more generally in the wider public? Thank you.
Thank you, Gonzalo, for interesting and also very important question. The first one, yeah, it was a deliberate choice because those computer engineers we are working with, they are working on computer visions. They only look at the visions, the sites. They don't do sound analysis. That's why we focus on the site. But in the future, we want to develop an AI that analyze sound as well for the birds. Maybe not very, cranes are really big birds, so it might be a good subject for vision analysis. However, if we look at the small birds in the forest, and a lot of ecologists told me they can identify the species by the sounds, and sound analysis could be a good big like breakthrough for an AI to identify the bird species by just listening to their sounds. So that could be one way to go forward after this project. And your second question, thank you for sharing your thoughts. I have to admit that I haven't thought much about this descaling, but that is really convincing argument, and AI could deprive our capacity, our ability to train ourselves to identify the species. And that's a crucial knowledge and crucial skill, not just for ecologists, but probably for other amateur ecologists like yourself. And so, I to be honest, I haven't thought much. I haven't given much thought about it, but that's a really good point, and I will be thinking about it in the making progress with this project. Thank you.
And we have our next question from Rebecca. She said, "Thank you for a very interesting talk. You also mentioned the digital twin component of the project. Were you involved with that? And is there anything that you can tell us about it?"
Yeah, thank you for asking about the digital twin. That's our third project. And so basically, we want to build a sort of ecological digital twin of a specific area of Choron, and by providing ecological data and also some other data like spatial data and the human settlements and roads and some infrastructure and other information together. Why we do this is we want to see if it is possible to make environmental simulation of the changing population of the cranes by in relation to the changes happen to that area. Because the CCZ area has been in public debate for the many years, because the local government and also local residents try to release their area out of the CCZ to avoid the restrictions. So the CCL line has been moved to the north a lot for the past 10-20 years. But that means the resting place and the feeding place of animals are disappearing. So if we could make environmental simulation of the changing populations and changing locations of the cranes in relation to the changes like political and other environmental economic changes happen to that area, we were hoping that we could make some argument that after the CCZ has been removed, that was not good for the cranes and other animals and also environment. So we need to make some arrangement to protect the area. So that was the idea to develop a digital twin of the particular area. And then we also learned creating a digital twin takes lots of money, and that's super expensive. So we scaled down the project a little bit, and now we are trying to develop a smart glass based digital visualization of the area as kind of alternative.
We have only maybe 1 minute left. We only have 2 questions left. So one is very general. It's asking, you know, maybe you have other challenges the lab met when ecologists collaborate with computer scientists. And then the other question kind of echoes what Gonzalo just asked, and asked about the AI's teaching about learning animals and also the role of animals in these teacher relationships.
Yeah, how do I see the what is the role of it? Yeah, let me just start by responding to Bunny's points and about the sight and sound. I think we covered this by responding to Gonzalo, but I think you make really a good point about what are the role of animals in these learning and teaching relationships. That's something I need to work on a bit further, because I felt like I treated the cranes as kind of passive subject in this discussion, but the cranes have agency, and that makes us to act in particular ways, and also to make some changes to the ways in which we develop AI. So we haven't much touched upon this, the agency of the cranes and other mammals, but that's some point to go forward in this project. And thank you for pointing out that. And the other question by Siwei, about some challenges of working with interdisciplinary group of people. Yeah, the first thing is we feel like we speak in different languages. We all speaking in Korean, but it feels like we speak in different languages, and there are lots of misunderstandings. And this is pencil, but one computer engineer calls this is something, and ecologists call this is something else. And I try to put them in communication. You two are actually speaking the same language. It feels like that's my job. And also there are different levels of accuracy. In kind of conventionally shared in the discipline, in the different disciplines. So some discipline is really care about the very accurate numbers, but other disciplines are more relaxed about the accuracy, but more think about more the broader meanings of the process. So yeah, we have some communication challenges and also interesting misunderstandings, which I like a lot. And yeah, that's the challenges, if you say challenge.
Okay. Thank you, Myung-Ae. I think we are running out of time. So I guess for all those who haven't got a chance to get answers from Myung-Ae, could just write an email to her afterwards. And Gonzalo, do you want to say something at the end?
I would just like to say, stay tuned. We're going to have our next seminar. It's going to take place on January 12th. And our distinguished speaker is going to be a Sci-Tech Asia member who is with us, Yi-Chan Rao, who is going to talk to us about dreaming like a market beneath the rise and fall of China's P2P lending platforms. I'm looking forward to your talk, Yi-Chan. And I would like to wish you Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, I suppose, because we won't see you before next year. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Myung-Ae. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you guys for inviting me to this talk. I really enjoyed it. Thanks. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.